Good morning, and yeah, thanks for having a look at this video if you're watching. And this time there is no real subject I will talk about, so it's basically just random stuff which will come out of my mouth, and we all hope it's just words. um, so, what's happening? On the one hand, I looked into one of my kids' exams this morning, and it was a very bad grade in German classes, and it was about text interpretation and summarizing and a communication model. And the text was dealing with the fact that if you have a daughter mother, but potentially also all other kinds of parent child relationships, that these relationships are evolving after, or these people are evolving after they have left the house. Yeah, so it was a very close connection before, and then the connection is rather loose, and people still continue to develop, but the parent still sees the child as it was when before it left the house, basically. And whilst maybe back then it didn't like a certain type of food or something like that, it has evolved. Maybe it likes that food now, and the assumption around the kid are or child are and pretty fixed in this example, mother's in this text, mother's head, and still believes that the daughter doesn't like sushi, for instance, and that there was also it was also mentioned that, and I don't know why the author is referring to mother-daughter relationships so much, but she is a she, maybe that's the reason. But also she talks about that in former times when the kid was young, the daughter was young, she was used to go to her mother for advice, and the mother gave her advice, and the daughter implemented it more or less. As she continued to grow up, she still has the reflex to go to her mother to ask for advice, but at the same time, when the mother gives advice, she is reluctant to take it because she feels then, yeah, sort of uh, not independent enough, not self managing or adult life enough to make her own decisions, but she still gets advice from her mother, and she doesn't want that. And there the author says something quite interesting, because she says then it is important for both the mother but also the daughter to implement new, to replace the old habits with something new. And I think that this is why I don't think that the text is genuinely for mothers and daughters, but I think I can see that at least with my parents as well, or in my own behavior as well, that I still sort of complain to them basically when there is stuff going on. I mean, luckily they are still alive and they're still in good mental shape or health, so they're able to even grasp, let's say, the more complex politics which sometimes happen in my work life, and I can still explain these things, and they can still offer some almost advice, you could say. But yeah, I have the situations where I do complain and I actually don't want any advice. I don't, yeah, I don't want to hear that stuff, because then I feel a bit like a child again, and then I, yeah, realize that my reflex of complaining to them doesn't always help. So that was one thing I wanted to get out of the door. Let's mention something completely randomly different. So over the last few days, I was off sick from work, and I luckily 90% of the cases I'm still able to play computer games whilst I'm sick. and I played very intensively also over the weekend. And but every now and then I need a break from computer gaming. And when I say break, I mean something like a week, a month, up to 3/4 of a year. That's, I think, the longest break I've had so far. And here's another break. So we have the 7th of November. I'm back at work, so to speak. Yeah, so I'm able to work today, which is great. And at the same time, I'll take a break from gaming, and I just uninstalled, so I can see my screen here, or remainers of it, so I can still see the empty space where the PUBG icon was. So not playing PUBG in the next days. And let's see how this works. And I hope my plan is actually that originally I wanted to sell my graphics cards, because the graphics card prices are still somewhat high-ish. That means I would still get a good amount of money for my graphics card, but at the same time it doesn't really matter. The problem is, though, my normal, let's say the rest of my computer also has a graphics card on chip, but that isn't able to go with DisplayPort into my very nice screens here. And this is unacceptable. I have very nice screens, and I won't use VGA or DVI connectors to them. So, so I still have the graphics card. I thought it would be a great idea to sell it and then buy myself a completely new computer, maybe 6 months down the line, something. Yeah, and I was hoping that I can do a break until roughly March-ish next year, because, and this is maybe the next thing I would like to talk about, my new computer kit. So what maybe I should write this briefly down, what I'm talking about, so I can put it into the comments and people have at least an idea what this video is about. So what we have is first a text interpretation, child-adult relationships. Then we had stop playing PUBG for 5 months. Oh my god, if I'm writing this down, it's just crazy. And then the next one is a new computer kit. I mean, my background is not that I'm doing this agile stuff, of course, but my original background is since 1986, roughly. I am playing computer games. I'm interested, and back then in 1986, computers sucked. Yeah, so computers were very, very expensive. I started with a 286 with a turbo mode where it had 16 megahertz, and I can't remember the RAM we had. To be honest, my gut feeling is it must have been a megabyte or 2. I don't know, can't remember that. And was actually a working machine of my dad, but of course I used it for gaming, and I played Flight Simulator 3. And just for the people out there who have no clue what a 286 is and what 16 megahertz actually means. So it means 16, yeah? Just remember 16. If you are buying a modern, and it is one core, yeah? So you have one CPU in your, that's the main thing which does the job there. Yeah, it's called central processing unit. So it's a very important and performance relevant aspect of your machine, your computer, and it's single core, and it has 16 megahertz. 16 of something. A new computer today has, let's take, it doesn't really matter. So the new ones do easily have 8 to 16 cores. Yes, let's take one of the 16 core machines. So basically they have 16 times a central processing unit. Each of the cores is as powerful. So a single core equals the 286 back then, not in terms of performance, but really in its function. Yeah, so you could run the complete PC just with one of the 16 cores. So you have 16, basically you have 16 CPUs inside. Then they have figured out at some point that it's possible to simulate a second core. I don't exactly know the details at the moment, but it is somehow using, even if you're fully using one core, you're not fully using it because there is stuff he could do on the side, so to speak. Yeah, and this stuff is virtualized into a second core, so you have more or less 30 in case of 16 physical cores, you have 16 virtual cores on the side, and in theory you can double the performance through this. But let's stick with the 16 physical cores for the time being, each of them having these days between 3,200 to sometimes even 5,000 megahertz. So what has happened? Yeah, 16 times, let's take the middle, take the 4,000 versus 16, what is it, 26 years ago. Huh? 26? Shit, I'm older. 36 years ago. Yeah, so this is amazing. The next thing is, of course, that not only this has happened, yeah, so we have much more megahertz, we have more cores. So this is also already an insane performance boost just from the sheer numbers. We have memory on these things, etc. So maybe I'm going too much into detail here, but at the end of the day, there's been a leap in terms of I was always interested in this stuff. Then I studied it as well. I studied economics and informatics, the special combination we have here in Germany. People always say when you studied this, you have neither a clue about economics nor about informatics. Yes, true. We never know anything about something. I realize the more I dig deeper into topics, the less I know about them. Mm. But let's say being a gamer, building my own PCs for decades, and studying that stuff and working in that environment gives me at least a bit of a glimpse. And uh, the new machines are, everything evolves like that at the moment. So the new kit I want to buy is probably an AMD. They seem to have a better performance heat ratio. So I'm very interested, not so much because of the climate change. Yeah, climate change is important, don't get me wrong. But when I build my PC, I'm looking for a silent, powerful machine. And for being silent and powerful, you need a high performance per watt, basically. And of course, I need to come into this gaming environment where I say, okay, it's high performing. It's not super high performing, because super high performing, it's insane what this is costing. Yeah. So if you build a new PC where you're saying, okay, I don't give a shit about how it looks, etc. I just want to be at the top notch of performance. You're easily 5 to 10,000 euro. So that was almost impossible for a few years. Yeah, getting a normal home machine for this amount of money, you had to buy equipment which was actually for companies. So to use, or workstations, real serious stuff to get there. For consumer electronics, basically, it was impossible. You could buy the most pricey consumer CPU with the most pricey consumer graphics card, and you would end up maybe in the range of 3 to maximum 5,000. And now we have tripled that easily. But on the other hand, if you're not aiming for the super high performance, but just, let's say, to moderate performance, you're I'm at the moment in the range of 3,500 euro, and that is a Ryzen 5900. I would probably buy the next version. Then they announced a new GPU, a 7900 XT and XTX. The good thing I have heard about it so far is that the power consumption is in comparison to NVIDIA's 4090, which can be up to 600 watt, apparently is less. And I've seen benchmarks where the NVIDIA is taking 300 to 400 watts out of, or is consuming 300 to 400 watts in normal gaming scenarios. So it's actually 300 to 400 is already, in my eyes, too much. But anyways, it's better than 600, of course. It's apparently just the peaks where it's able to take 600, and but the AMD one is comparably less. So that is supposed to have a peak of 350, if I got that right. So and they were just promising it basically. Yeah. So when they announce graphic cards very early in the days, then they just promise stuff because they don't show you real benchmarks, or it's not tested by let's say external people. It's just done by the company themselves, and of course they will always look on the bright side of life. But they promised a better FPS watt ratio in comparison to former structures, and that's great. So looking forward to that. And yeah, what I'm, to be honest, most interested in is actually PCI Express 5 with a high performing SSD, because the same which happened with the megahertz example I gave earlier happened to the transfer rate of your hard drive, so the stuff where you store and put your operating system on and all the programs. I recall times where it's not so far long ago. It's actually still, most of the PCs here in my home still have an HDD and an SSD, because the SSDs were back then quite fast but relatively expensive. So we bought small ones just to get the, let's say, the main stuff on it. But for the pictures and videos and whatever we are storing on our machines, that big stuff we never stored on an SSD, because that would have been just a waste of money and the performance isn't that relevant. But these days the prices dropped significantly for SSDs, and it's much more affordable buying 2 terabytes, for instance. And that would be fully enough. And for my kit, having a 2 terabyte SSD would make a HDD redundant. And an HDD has a transfer rate of, let's say, 40, 50, maybe even 100 megabytes per second. Yeah, but depends. So normally it's less. And then if you take, so it's really more like 40 or 50. If you take modern SSDs, they're able to transfer 7,000 megabytes per second, 5,000. And someone said to me, and I'm not sure whether they are on the market, but apparently it's possible to go up to 13,000 gigabytes per second with the new PCI Express stuff. And the amazing thing is, if you put a very let's say as fast as possible CPU to that, yeah, so a Ryzen 5950 or whatever, or 5900, and then you have a very fast SSD. I mean, the speed in which any of the two things are happening, so either processing something on your CPU or loading or storing something on the SSD, must be really fast. So installing Windows, I mean, this is insane. I mean, if some of you remember how it was to install a Windows operating system when you still had floppies or CDs, yeah, it took ages. This was a 2-3 hour endeavor to get Windows installed. Nowadays it is, and this is not the newest kit we are looking here at. It's a good kit. It has a Samsung SSD 960 or whatever, so a bit of an older version, 3, 4, 5 years old. And back then a pretty good CPU, Core i7 6700K. And it takes me maybe, I would say, roughly 10 minutes to install Windows. And that's end to end, yeah. So that's every dialogue clicked, etc. And I would be really keen to see how fast it would be doing this with the new stuff. Yeah, so we spoke about the new computer kit. We spoke about stop playing PUBG, text interpretation. Is there anything else? I mean, I have there's one topic which I should rather discuss with my coach than with a random, not undefined audience out there. But basically, maybe to teaser on it a little bit. Sometimes you wonder what your next step in life is, because maybe that goes back to the beginning where we said there is a evolvement in the relationship between parents and child. Basically, the two people, the parent and the child, are developing. And it is very, in my eyes, it is very superficial to say, okay, we are evolving in terms of whether we like sushi or not. Yeah, so that's the example from the text. Of course we do. Our taste evolves. Yeah. I never liked beer or wine when I was younger. I didn't like coffee, in particular not when it was black, so an Americano. Yeah, so my taste definitely evolves, but this is more a biological also degradation of my senses. At least that's what some people say, that you basically, yes, your taste develops, it changes, has to do with thousands of things, and at the same time you also are desensitized over time. You're losing a little bit of your, I don't know, you are able to eat stronger stuff. Yeah, so stronger tastes when you're getting older. Anyway, but this is superficial. What I believe is that everything changes. Yeah, this thing here inside. I mean, every 7 years, all our cells are renewed in the body. That includes the stuff which is inside here. And I learned so much. I see so much. I don't think that we are. We sometimes say we are a product of our environment. And I'm pretty sure that we have maybe a bit of a core backbone thing where I think certain things are almost engraved and very, very hard to change. But this is not how much sports you do or things like that, but it's really how you go about life. Yeah, are you a person who is generally able to recover from a blow? Is more smiling maybe an average? And even these things do change. Yeah, so I think it depends a bit. You know, this is a chemistry machine in here. The brain is producing hormones, or it's producing a lot of things, and I think that your personality is changing over time as well. And at least to some extent. And that makes me wonder, you know, when you look at this daughter-parent relationship, or so if the personality is changing, there's so much more to how much it, you know, we start our lives with, let's say, one kind of personality. At some point when we're, you know, bang 18 or bang 20, at some point we are choosing what we study, and then we delve into a work environment, and work environments are sometimes pretty stable. So a household company is whatever household appliances company is still producing household appliances even 50 years into the game. Yeah, so yes, there are different household appliances, they're much more electrified, etc., but it's still a dishwasher, it is still a washing machine, it still does the same job. Yeah, so also the purpose in life of these things haven't changed. It is still making our lives much more easier, etc., but this, it's not suddenly flying you to the moon. And yeah, I think this is that we as an individual sometimes evolve faster than maybe a 20, 50, 100,000 people big company. And I think this is what I'm a bit struggling with maybe at the moment, or not struggling with, but this is what I'm thinking about at the moment, where have I evolved over or into in the last few years, and how does that comprise maybe a person who's maybe if you're looking for a junior project manager or junior developer or junior business analyst, you could pick me when I was 20 years younger, because I had most of the stuff which was required for this job, maybe the potential, maybe the interest, etc. But you know that you're an empty shell at this point in time. You have nothing, literally nothing, no experience on which is job related. You have just the foundation, and then you almost go through one apprenticeship after the other. You learn something in that job, then you learn something in a different job, then you learn something in different contexts with different people, with different let's say also tasks. I said household appliances. Yes, of course they're doing the same thing, but inside, when you're in this company, you might work one day on one item and the next day on something you've never worked on before, where you're gathering complete new experiences. And this is what we could call the life apprenticeship. We're in the, and what does it qualify me for now, 20 years into the game of being a constant apprenticeship? And I think I need to figure this out for myself, and then go into the market and apply for a job. Whether that doesn't need to mean that I'm changing the company or that I'm changing the job even, but when you identify that what your, let's say, skills are, that your professional skills, one has evolved over the last 20 years constantly, either on one skill like playing the violin, or on thousands of skills or different aspects of work, it still makes you a particular, it's almost like a puzzle which is always changing its picture, and looking at this picture and to say, okay, now I'm a locomotive. Now I'm I don't know, a plane, and next day I'm a car. So when I'm a car, of course I wouldn't fly, and then maybe driving fast on a road straight ahead is maybe the best job I could do at this point. And the last 1.5 years when I was doing the DevOps transformation at my company, this was so intense. We had so much fight ongoing with people who were fighting the change, and unfortunately I wasn't able to detach myself emotionally from these fights. I was I'm a fan of this agile stuff. If someone doesn't like it, is heavily fighting against it, he always to some extent fights against me, and although I should have known better that this is not me as a person, etc., was hard to not take it personal. And even when I was able not to take it personal, it was still very exhaustive at the end of the day. And to be honest, this is what I spent most of the last 1.5 years about. I haven't spent time thinking about what agile is, or didn't didn't really learn, you know, I learned 90% of that stuff, 95% already before. Yes, I got another 3-4% in comparison, but not a big leap. The biggest leap was about learning about myself, learning about what people see when they go through change, how this affects me, how do I deal with the consequences of that, how realizing that I take stuff too personal, realizing that it drains my batteries, is that how to fill them back up again, and how to turn this transformation for me personally into a sustainable pace so I'm able to contribute to it consistently. This is what I did in the last 1.5 years. This was a personal development journey on the soft skill side, and on personal experience side, and that's contributed, of course, through the personal trainings I'm going through at the moment. So they are very, very intense. The coaching studies I'm doing, and the coaching studies I'm doing together with a company, they are super intense in terms of again, analyzing who you are, what your challenges are, and working on these. These trainings are basically a bit like a very strong reflection or even magnifying glass for some of the strengths and weaknesses one person has. And when you're encountered with your weaknesses, of course, this is firstly, it's not always fun. If you're honest to yourself, if I'm honest to myself, I realize I'm not perfect by any chance, and for me, not being perfect, it means you have some stuff which is not going good, yeah, and I want to be good. So it puts me under pressure on the one hand, but at the same time it allows me to also further evolve. But doing this for 1.5 years is just intense. So what was the last thing? How do we call this? Personal development. I wish you now a very nice start into the week. If there's anything you are taking out of this video, just share it in the comments. I'm interested what you're maybe going through in terms of personal development, or what do you think about child-parent relationships and how exhausting they sometimes are. Do you stop to play any games, or do you change anything in your life? And do you buy a new computer? What would you buy? Have a nice